It's showtime! Creepshow was released in 1982, and its sequel, Creepshow 2, was released in 1987. Because these films are anthologies, I am also going to make kind of a mini anthology in this review today because I'm going to be talking about both Creepshow and Creepshow 2. So you're getting the best of both worlds today. So, Creepshow is, like I mentioned, a horror anthology, and the stories are written by Stephen King, and the original film was directed by George A. Romero, who you may know from all of his classic zombie movies, especially Night of the Living Dead. And Stephen King, honestly, you probably know, he's written so many classic horror stories: The Shining, Carrie, Christine, Pet Sematary, It. He has quite the reputation, and because of that, this film has so many unique stories in it that it overall is a really fun film. To me, Creepshow is the best anthology film I've ever seen. There are many films that try to be a good anthology, and many of them succeed. Trick or Treat was a great anthology. There was the Twilight Zone movie, but none have surpassed Creepshow, because it truly is one of a kind. The film opens with a father rebuking his son for reading classic horror magazines and comics, very much inspired by the controversies of the EC comics when they came out back in the 50s. They caused quite a stir, and a lot of parents didn't want their children reading them, but obviously we have to have this comic in the film to make it go somewhere. The father is played by Tom Atkins, who you may know from Halloween 3, and he is a veteran in the horror world, so it's pretty cool to see him here. The cast is really star-studded. There are so many great actors in this film. To me, the standout is really Leslie Nielsen. He is probably one of my favorite actors of all time, and though mostly he does comedies, he's quite intimidating in this movie. So how it works is, besides the opening and the epilogue at the end, the film follows 5 different stories, all telling a very unique type of horror story. And in the sequel, Creepshow 2, there are 3 stories, so not as many as the original, and I'll talk about Creepshow 2 in a second. So in Creepshow, like I said, you have 5 stories. The first is called Father's Day, and it is about a father that comes back from the dead to seek vengeance on the family that has killed him, essentially. This is probably my least favorite of the stories. Not that it's bad, but in terms of all the other ones, this is certainly the most, I guess, generic. The plot is simple. Zombie dad comes back from the dead, kills everybody. You saw where that was coming. All the other stories have pretty unique little twists and turns, but that one's very verbatim. I still like it, though. The effects by Tom Savini are amazing in each of the stories, but especially in this one and in the Crate one, really great. So the first story is Father's Day. The second story is called The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, which is very almost verbatim of a story that Stephen King wrote, following a farmer who's kind of in the middle of nowhere. A meteor lands in his yard, and he touches it only to get this kind of life form growing on his hands and over his entire body in his house, and it just keeps growing. This is one of the best stories, in my opinion, because it's so creepy, and especially if you don't like stuff on you, if you're a germaphobe, it really will get under your skin. And it's written quite well. This is also one of the few times that Stephen King has acted quite a long time in his film. He makes a cameo here and there in movies like Pet Sematary and It, but he has a full segment in Creepshow, and while his acting's over the top, the entire film is over the top, and he really gives a great performance, I think. The third story is a fan favorite, Something to Tide You Over, which follows Ted Danson's character Harry as he is discovered cheating on another man's wife, and this man, of course, is Leslie Nielsen, who gives just a stellar performance. You probably know him from films like Airplane and the Naked Gun movies, but he is very intimidating in this movie, and shockingly very scary. This one also gets under my skin because it involves being buried alive, and that's something that a lot of people are frightful of. So it really works well, and there are some great effects in this short. And I don't want to spoil all of it for you, but the makeup work is fantastic. Ted Danson becomes like this zombie guy. It's great. And while I'm on the subject, let me talk about the scenes that get very horrific, because there's such a style with the lighting, the camera work, that makes the film so unique. I love how they portray the horror scenes. It really adds that comic book feel to it. And the music is really well done too. I love all of the music beats, especially in a few key scenes. It really adds a lot to the film. The fourth segment, the fourth story, is, as most people would consider it to be, the best, at least the longest. It's actually not my personal favorite story, but it is the longest of the film. It's called The Crate, and it follows a creature from Antarctica that gets released from a crate in a college, and a man ends up using this monster to go after his wife, whom he loathes. This one's one of the most bizarre, but it also has so many great effects from Tom Savini. It's very scary, and it definitely has a great monster feel to it. And the final story is actually my personal favorite. They're Creeping Up on You, which follows E.G. Marshall, who you probably know from films like Superman the movie and National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, as kind of this racist, rude old man called Upson Pratt, and he lives in his penthouse apartment in New York City, and it gets infested with cockroaches. But he is a germaphobe, and this freaks him out severely. I just love this one so much. The music cues, especially from the jukebox, E.G. Marshall's amazing and outstanding performance, just the way it's written, and of course all of the cockroaches, which none, by the way, are CGI. It's all real cockroaches. It's such an amazing scene, and those cockroaches are actually one of the reasons why the budget is high. It was one of the most expensive things on the set, were all of those darn roaches. But all of the segments are incredible, and they wrap up start to end with a great intro and epilogue. Again, like I said, with Tom Atkins and his son. He ends up getting a voodoo doll and wreaking revenge on his dad. All of the scenes are fantastic. This is another one of my favorite horror films because it doesn't take itself too seriously, yet it has some really great premises that I love. I'm going to give Creepshow a 4.5 out of 5 skulls on the R.I.P. Reviews rating scale. Now, let's talk for a minute about its sequel, Creepshow 2. So Creepshow 2 is actually not directed by George A. Romero. It's actually directed by Michael Gornick, who was the cinematographer of the original Creepshow, which is interesting. Romero does return, though. He writes the screenplay, and Stephen King still is inspiring the stories. There are 3 stories this time instead of the 5 stories we got in Creepshow. They are Old Chief Woodenhead, which is actually my personal favorite, which follows a vengeance-seeking, kind of, I guess, Indian statue that seeks revenge, like I said, on these 3 teen boys after they murder a shop owner and his wife. There also is the second story, The Raft, which follows a group of teens that go on this raft in the middle of a lake, and there is this weird blob that goes across the water that basically devours them alive. And there is The Hitchhiker, which follows a woman whom is driving home and makes a bad choice, let me just say, and ends up getting stalked and attacked by a zombie hitchhiker. "Thanks for the ride, lady!" That's kind of the line that he says throughout the scene. It's really fun and over the top, just like the first one. But to me, anyways, doesn't have the same feel and weight and levity that the original did. The original was so over the top and fun and goofy. It had the great lights and all that. And not that these stories are bad, but they just don't hold up as well as the originals do. And it's not like it's a terrible film or anything, because I do like some of the segments. The Chief Woodenhead thing's actually pretty creepy, I must say. But, I don't know, it doesn't quite feel the same. It's not a bad sequel by any means. I have both on DVD. I like to watch them. But I just wish there was something more to this one that could make it as interesting as the original. And for Creepshow 2, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 skulls, I think. I don't know. I was iffy on the ranking for Creepshow 2, but I'm going to give it a 3 for now. Perhaps I'll touch on it and Creepshow again in the future. I really do love these films, and I think they're really unique. But I don't know, Creepshow 2 could have been so much more unique, especially since Creepshow is such a fantastic piece of film. Now, in the late 2000s, there was actually a movie called Creepshow 3, where these, I guess, independent filmmakers bought the rights to Creepshow and made their own. Don't watch it. I've seen stuff from it. It does not look anything like the original. It has nothing to do with those movies. It's just these people doing it by themselves. You do not need to see Creepshow 3. Creepshow and Creepshow 2 are all you need. There are 8 mini-stories along with the epilogues and the intros to each of them. They're really fun films to watch around this time of year, and they are some of my favorite stories of horror. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the Haunttober festivities. And remember, as always, for all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer.